Hey everyone, Nella and Drew here with a response to Leisha's prompt about face-ups. She actually had a really interesting couple of questions. So the to her link to the prompt will be in the description below. Um, then the first part of the prompt was do's and don'ts of face-ups. Essentially, in our experience, like what do we absolutely do in face-ups, what do we try to avoid, that sort of thing. I've only done a couple of face-ups so far. Um, Vince had his redone twice. I'd say face-ups really depend on your characters, if you have characters, or the look you want your doll to have, as well as your own personal style. So none of my suggestions will be related to style. I'd say with face-ups, I find that if you feel like you're pressed for time, don't rush yourself. Because if you rush yourself and you feel like you're pressed for time, then you're going to be, or you're more likely to be unhappy with the face-up. I don't actually have the face-up that I felt the most rushed with, which was Finn's. Really struggled with Finn's first face-up. The second one went a bit better. But I can actually show you a bit on Drew. I'm quite happy with how this part of her face-up turned out, but you might be wondering why her eyebrows are always entirely covered. Problem is, and this falls into the second part of the prompt, your mistakes from your first face-ups. The eyebrow placement and the eyebrow shape. They're way too arched. Fins were worse. These fins were these thin, bright things, and just really looked really clownish. So yeah, do take your time. That doesn't mean that, you absolutely have to take, I don't know, something crazy amount of time, 8 hours to do a face-up. It just means that if you feel like you're pressed for time, then maybe it's not the best idea to do the face-up then. Maybe you should wait until you have a bit more spare time. As annoying as that can be. The things I absolutely always do with all of my face-ups is blush the cheeks and nose and chin, and do the lips. I actually do all of that blushing on the first layer. After I do she had one layer of sealant and then the paint started. But typically you have 3 layers of sealant, and then you do your first base layer of paint or pastel or whatever you're using. So I always do the blushing and the lips on that first layer, and then I seal and then I do everything else. I also always do the eyebrows on a separate layer from any stuff that's around the eyes. For instance, Drew's eyebrows and her eyeshadow are actually on 2 different layers. This is just so that if you're erasing the eyebrows a lot, which you probably will be because eyebrows are tough, that way you don't mess up the stuff that you already really like. Because it's really hard if you do accidentally smudge something else to try and get to precisely what it was. It's really difficult. And one of the other parts was essentially your worst face-up, so you face-up horror stories. There's going to be another link in the description to my BGD horror stories, one of which includes face-ups, or specifically removing Finn's default Bumblebee face up. He almost turned blue in the process. My own fault, but yeah, that was freaky. My worst face-up was probably Finn's first face-up, which was one of my two first face-ups, because Drew and Finn got their faces done at the same time. Finn's was definitely the worst. It looked really clownish. Extremely clownish. The blushing on his cheeks was way too much. Or rather, it wasn't too much, because I ended up using the same, because when I did second face up, I did the same actual spots where I blushed. But the color was too vibrant to pink, so it looked like he had gone into, like, his mother's rouge and put it on his cheeks. Like, it looked really clownish. His lips were way too pink. His eyelashes were too thick. His eyebrows were too thin. He just all in all looked really clownish. And I was able to take a few photos of him be, like, okay with it, but I redid his face up pretty quickly afterwards, just because I was like, no, I've learned my lesson, I have an idea on how to make this better, and I will improve this. I think that's actually pretty much about it. Just because all of my dolls have very different styles, there isn't something that I consistently do, except for, as I mentioned, what I do on the base layer. And the next video I post will be the BG Addicts prompt about face-up tips and tricks. So there's going to be a real face-ups theme for the next probably couple of days. Bye, everyone.